You do not want to miss this episode. I'm talking to Carina Guzmán, founder and CEO of Creative Dev Ventures. She's into land development in Ottawa, and we're going to learn about what to watch out for. What are the pitfalls? What are the benefits? What area should you choose? And what should you not do? Hi, everyone. Welcome to Control and Compound. My name is Darren Mitchell, and I'm super excited about Carina joining us today. She's a coach, she's a wife, she's a mother, and she's a land development extraordinaire. Been doing it in Ottawa for about 14 years, and she really specializes in this land development. So I think there's going to be a lot of valuable insight if you're thinking of doing it, if you think of investing in land development, or you're thinking of doing land development yourself. So, Carina Guzmán, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great, Darren. Thank you for the intro and having me here today.
So you are living in our nation's capital, where all the great government work happens. If you, so, I got to ask you, because we talked briefly before we started, but I love you to share your story. How did you get to Ottawa, and how you chose Ottawa as a place to live?
Yes, so I was born and raised in El Salvador. So for those of you who don't know where El Salvador is, maybe now though, it's we're making the map. But it is in Central America. I was born and raised there, and in El Salvador we had civil war, so my parents decided to leave the country because of that. And when Canada opened the borders and they said we've accepted you, they were bringing in big families, which we were. They said, "Where do you want to go?" And my parents said, "Well, we live in the city, so I guess in the city." So they said, "Okay, well, you want to go to the capital then? You want to go to Ottawa?" And then that's how we landed here in Ottawa, and I've been here ever since.
Oh, that's fantastic. So tell me, how'd you get started in your real estate journey? We all have different paths. So how'd you get started in real estate, and then what led you to land development?
Yeah. So I was a government worker. So as you mentioned earlier, Ottawa, it's all about government people. We're known for that. Very great, stable. We live in like a little bubble. And my immigrant parents said, get school, get a great education, get a job, and you're set. Like just get a government job. That's all you need to do. And I did. I did that. Good, daughter, and I did that for a while. I liked it actually. I enjoyed it. But after a certain while, 10, 15 years of being in there, it just wasn't really fulfilling, to say the least. And it was actually a very toxic environment. So I was doing real estate on the side for a very long time. My dad actually did real estate back home, and I watched him growing up buy properties, sell it, sever, sell some, put some where his dad would live in. So he would just utilize real estate for different things. He didn't teach us much, but you learned, right, as a child, just listening to your parents. So that's what I did. And I always had the bug for it because of that, I think. And my dad and I, when I was 22 and I got my first government job right after university, I told him I want to get my first property, and he co-signed with me, and we did that, and that's how I ended up growing into that. And eventually I wanted to get out of this job because I was not happy. And I started going to multiple events in like different real estate events, all the ones, the big names that you already know. I went to all of them, and I learned a lot, and I met a lot of great people. I would see the trend, what people were doing, multifamily flipping, the HGTV thing, the SDU conversions and all the different things. And I was having my first child back then, and I just thought, all of that sounds like a lot of work, like I'm a government worker, remember? So I was like, what is something that would fit my lifestyle? And it just happened, Darren, that I was listening to, or I was reading, I should say, the Ottawa Business Journal. So shout out to OBJ, they're amazing. Read your business journals local, whatever you do. If you're looking to invest or just learn. And they had an article there, Darren, that said the city of Ottawa is supportive of intensification around transit stations. And that for me was like, ding, it was like that light bulb. And I thought, what is this? This is interesting. And I would talk to a lot of people, and they were like, never heard of that. I don't know what that means. And I talked to builders and other people in the industry. They're like, I don't know what that means. And then the city published all of the intensification maps around the transit. Like a 2-year old could understand it, you know.
Yeah.
Red was for highest intensification, the orange medium, and green, you know, lowest intensification, but they were all going up. And I would show people that when I would go to all of these events, and nobody was following any of that.
So
And
so
I
the city was
love
making it easier, or the zoning and the permits a lot easier around transit areas. Is that the
around
idea?
transit because the
Very
city of Ottawa was putting in a brand new light rail stations, you know, and they put a lot of money into that. So they were changing the zonings and creating new maps to allow for intensification around these. And I just thought this is like a gold mine. So I started telling people there's these hidden gems that like nobody's talking about. And as an investor, you know, I just thought I'm just going to go out there and start looking for it. And that's what I did. I started buying the little bungalows on the largest lots within throwing, like, you could throw a rock to the stations, you know, like that's what I did. And that's all I focused on. And I knew like this is just something that is going to be work out really well. I can develop it, I can do something. I had the idea, I didn't know how. Luckily I convinced my husband somehow to do it with me, and we figured it out. And then the rest is just we just grew into that.
That's so cool. So you saw an opportunity, took advantage of it. You left the dark side of government and came over to the light as an entrepreneur. I love that story. Give up all your government pension and benefits and say, "Hey, I'd like to go on an income of 0 and start from scratch." I remember I
Totally.
I remember that feeling well. So I love that, that because the zoning changes, we can see them across Canada even happening today, right? Like, Vancouver, they're talking you can put 6 units up. Toronto, you can put 4 units up in certain areas. I've got a place in Mississauga, and they're all about the transit there. They're building a new LRT. For you to see that trend early, take advantage of it, it's very cool. So I want to dig into land development because there's not a lot of people we talk to in land development. A lot of people are buying and flipping or buying and holding, but land development, like, kind of walk us through, like, what are the factors you consider when you're evaluating a piece of property for land development? Like, what would be the first thing? Now, I know back then you were talking about the zoning, but today, when you're looking at a piece of land, like, what is the first thing you're looking for when evaluating a piece of land that you may use for land development?
Yeah. So I do want to add also to that question, Darren, is that you're right. I feel like land development is it's a very closed space.
Mm.
There's just like nobody really is into teaching it, and people in the land development space, I should say, generally speaking, do not share information. And I've been part of this field for 14 years now. And when I first started, nobody wanted to really talk to me about it or how they underwrite. What do they look for? I didn't know anything. But I've learned in other fields like the trades, construction, they all work with each other. They all refer each other. It's a very different lifestyle of being. Whereas in the land development world, it's really not. And I've seen that like across the board.
Yeah, I always
So
thought it was a bunch of rich guys sitting around smoking cigars in a boardroom deciding who's gonna develop this what next, but you're right,
it is. And
it's
so that makes it even more of a great area. But to your question, so there's a variety of things. One of the biggest one is size. So size matters, okay, in development. It really does. It's cliche to say that, but it is true. And I get this all the time. You know, I know a lot of investors maybe have, especially in very dense areas, you know, a 30 by 100 lot, it's very tight to build anything. You may have to assemble a few together to really even make it worthwhile. So that in itself, size. Then, of course, as we mentioned, is zoning. So there's that as of right zoning, which is as of right now, the zone existing on the lot allows me to do so and so. However, there's the hidden gems, which is a lot of the times, especially right now, as you mentioned just now, the cities are all rezoning and really upgrading for more density pretty much across the board, all of Canada right now, because of the housing crisis. And there is mandates to meet mandatory targets and just build more housing in general. So there's a lot more going on underneath the as of right now, so that you can look at the lots and say, where is there more potential to what I have here today? And those are mostly around transit. They're mostly around the 15-minute neighborhoods. So if anybody, has ever heard of the term 15-minute
Mhm.
neighborhood, it's it the concept is I can walk within walking distance within 15 minutes to all the main day-to-day amenities that I would ever need. So transit, community centers, little mom and pop shops, a coffee shop, maybe there's a recreational center or whatever it is. So you want to be in those very like well established, well developed areas. Those are the best ones where a lot of this intensification will happen.
Cool. Okay, so the other thing I'm always curious about land development is like how do you manage risk associated with land development? 'Cause especially in the economic times you're in. But I mean, I'm always picturing like you're buying land, you're trying to get zoning changes, you're hanging on to it. What if this doesn't get approved? Like, how do you manage that risk? To me, and again, it's not that I know any better, but it seems to me like it's risky because people get all these things and it takes years sometimes to get things developed. Like, how do you
Yep.
manage that risk?
Oh yeah, and I agree with you. Development is it's a very different strategy than all other real estate strategies out there. So the risk is definitely high. I would say that the highest risk that I have seen right now, just from teaching, I've been doing this for many, many years now. And the biggest risk that people take is paying for a property because of its development potential. Right off the bat, if you are buying a property because of its development potential that you see, maybe you've talked to the city, maybe you've talked to an architect or an urban planner or whoever, and they have said, yes, there's definitely opportunity to, maybe put a 30 or 40 unit here. People will pay or overpay, I should say, for that opportunity. Whereas I always say, buy it for what it is. If it's that little bungalow in that oversized lot, excellent. Buy it as a bungalow. It is that little overrun bungalow. That's where you're going to pay for it. Whatever that market says that little bungalow is worth, that's what you should always pay. That, what right there, if everybody could just do that one thing, you will de risk yourself completely because you're right, Darren.
Mhm.
There's nothing ever set in stone. There's no home runs here. Even if the city says will allow you to do this, they can change their minds down the road, or the whole entire neighborhood may come and object your proposal, whatever the case might be. Which at that point you would really tweak, but still, it can take time. The second thing to de-risk is ideally find a property that has development potential, but there's a property there to carry your costs on a month to month basis. So that little bungalow that maybe has an SDU, perfect. That's awesome because it's bringing revenue and it's ideally carrying your monthly costs, so mortgages and insurance and all that kind of stuff. I get so many people, Darren, that will say, I want to buy this piece of land. Do not buy land, at least not for the beginning. If it's your very first one, I only bought land like 2 years ago. Before that, I was only buying property
Mm.
because there's just so much overhead, Darren. Like you're paying, all the development costs, the package, the architecture, the structural, the mechanical, all of the things that we have to get done to submit our application. It's a lot. And it's costly, right? So what you want to do ideally is have that property carry your carrying costs on a monthly basis. And that way it allows you to de-risk, but also not have so much stress on you to put additional money towards that development aspect. So that alone Those two things I would say could completely de-risk right from the start.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, no, okay, 'cause, yeah, I was picturing buying land, but to your point, if you buy a place with an existing building, great, it's easier to finance, and it's a lot easier if you get cash flow coming in to pay those bills until you
Absolutely.
get the development done. And then my next question is, how do partnerships come into play? I assume there's a lot of collaborations and partnerships when you get into land development. How do you make sure you choose the right collaborators? Or do you choose collaborators? Like how's your process?
Yes, so we absolutely 100% do as part of Creative Dev Ventures. We do partner. And there's multiple types of partners. So there's the investor partner, they are partners to us. That's how we work with everyone. They come in as a partner to our development, our project. Then we have our builder partners, right? So I I don't do everything. As CDB, we are land developers and we buy the land and we'll permit it and do everything to get it going and approved, but we don't intend to do absolutely everything. So we do have infrastructure partners come in and do the infrastructure work with us as part of the project. We have builder partners that come in right from the beginning. Like I'm bringing in my entire partnerships to say we're looking at this project and our investors of course as well. We're looking at this project, who is in, so I'm creating the plan essentially for the partnerships and whatever it is that everyone needs instead of me creating a plan to and hope and praying that it's going to work. That's not how we do it. So
Hope is not a strategy.
partnerships. So partnerships are a huge component, and that's of course through just building really great relationships with people. Communication is really big, and my biggest thing is doing something that you really feel excited about and everyone else feels excited about, because that's what really makes it all fun and in all aspects of partnerships.
Cool. Okay. So can you walk me through a typical land development deal kind of from start to finish, step by step? Like not in great detail and in a very condensed you find the land, you do this, you do this, you do this, and this is the outcome. Walk me through a typical one or one you did recently, how it would work step by step.
Sure. So we get a lot of our deals. So any wholesalers who are maybe listening to this podcast, contact me. I love wholesalers. I work directly with wholesalers. Most of our deals and our projects come from off market. So that's one off. And when I look at something, it's almost like I can look at something at this point, Darren, and really look at it in 5 minutes. I can tell you yes or no. That's how it is. It's very simple for me. But if I think there is potential in it, I will go and vet the project. So by vetting, I'm talking about getting all the information on it, talking to the wholesaler, whoever brought it to me. Maybe it's the landowner directly, and trying to figure out what's on the property, how large is it? What does the municipality think of development right now in that specific area? Um, what services are there? Are there any services? Are there any wetlands? Is there anything that I should know about? So contamination, what's around it? So I'm not even going to the property directly myself. I'm just having a conversation about it because I look at so many that I don't have time to go to that property. So once I know, okay, there's enough opportunity here and it seems like there could be a potential, we now start talking about, okay, versus comparing what you are looking to get for this property, the purchase price, and now vetting with my team, what can we get out of it? Because really, you need to figure out, if I'm going to pay this much for this property, how much can I get out of that property? And does that make sense? Do those two things make sense? So I go and vet it with my team. And when I say team, I say my development managers, I've got my architects and my urban planners, and we put together a plan. So let's say it's a nice 1 acre property, very close to the transit. We know the zoning, maybe it's a very low density, but we know around the area it's a higher density, or the city has put out a secondary plan or changed the official plan to redesignate this area for more intensification. I'll have my architects do a whole entire massing. When we say massing, we talk about figuring out airspace and how many units can I get out of it, the box essentially. Or it might just be a subdivision, right? How many lots can I get out of this? That's the massing, figuring out what can I get out of this property. Once we know that, and we can do that very quickly, within a couple days, we know what can be done. And then we start the negotiation because I'm not going to spend any more time or my team's time to do any more work if I can't get it under contract. At that point, we put it under contract for the price that makes sense, and try to create a win-win situation. Once we have that under contract, we go into full vet mode, due diligence. So going to do pre-consultations with the city, talking to the civil engineers to determine capacity or any kind of showstoppers. We may have environmental done right away, which most of the time we do because we need it as part of our financing. Determining if there's any roadblocks. What we're trying to do is, are there absolutely any roadblocks? And at this point, I may be removing some conditions, right? I mean, the biggest question I get asked is how many months or how much time do you ask for conditions? It varies on complexity. I've had properties only 15 days conditional, and I've had others 10 months conditional
Wow.
because it might take us that length of time. But at that point, we're putting a lot of money in too, as well, to make sure that all of this is going to work out. Once we know for sure, that we're going to move forward with it, we close on the property. And then at that point, we're just full on, right? We go through all the approval process. That may take a year or two, depending on that complexity, maybe even more. If it's subdivision, we're talking about five, you know? And then of course at that point we're talking to all of our partners and creating the plan that's gonna be exactly to the T of what our partners would want in this project. And then we exit. And at that point, we're exiting in a variety of ways. Are we exiting when we rezone the property? Are we exiting when we complete the site plan application? Are we exiting when we put the servicing in and then selling off the lots? Or are we exiting when we complete the full construction and then everybody gets paid at that point? There's multiple exit points, which is one of the reasons why I love development as well. We can decide as a team where we're going to exit, and that's about it.
Yeah, I love that, like, I love the whole land development philosophy of, you're experts at what you do, and instead of, somebody trying to get permitting, trying to get zoning, trying to get mass and how much like, if you have a process and you stick to the process and you follow the process and you do it a bunch, you get really good at it. And I love the idea of that different exiting strategies. Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah.
if you cannot build it, if you cannot put water and sewer, and if you cannot do that, exit and still make your profit, then
That's the nice thing, Darren, about these partnerships. We have some developers, builder partners that just want the draft approved, and they'll go in and they have their entire team to do the whole servicing, to do all the build out, everything. They don't need CDV. They don't need Creative Dev Ventures to do that for them. They'll just buy the paper, and that's where I coined the whole flip the paper strategy because a lot of the times I still do to today, flip my paper over to my builder partners. They want to do that. So they'll buy it a little bit cheaper from me. I'm still making my money, but I exit at that point and I can exit all our partners, our investors, and we will move on to the next. So it's also a different way to de risk yourself by exiting at specific points and leaving that to someone else.
yeah,
So
I've got one of my favorite clients here in Halifax. He spent 3 years getting permitting and zoning done for this almost city block that he had bought over a 30 or 40-year period as a small business owner, and, the day after it got approved, he got a call from a couple people from Toronto with big checkbooks, and he exited at literally within a week of the approval of it is when they had the letter of intent signed, and it was
amazing.
like, multiple millions, and it was like, but it was 3 years to get to that point. But again, yeah, you're right. Developers wanna come in. They don't wanna mess around. They're ready to build. They got the money. They're gonna make their money on the build and the sell. Great, you make your
Exactly.
money on the land development.
And they want the pipeline. I'll give you another really good story because you reminded me, Darren. I have friends in the development world who bought land, similar to what the story you just mentioned, bought land in a great area, but bought it at a really amazing price. Literally, the day he closed on it, the same situation, right? He got phone calls from big players in the industries, and he made, I think, 14 million just by selling it right off. The next week, he sold it again. It's amazing what you can do when you find the hidden gems.
All right. So the next question I'm going to ask, as someone who doesn't tend to have the patience to put up with the with these things. So how do you approach community engagement? So you get a lot of, people, oh, not in my backyard, NIMBYs, we don't want this in our backyard. And then the other sort of thing that goes along with that is the environmental challenges, the environmental factors and floodplains and soil conditions and all that. Like, how do you manage that sort of soft problems of community
Yes.
and environmental? How challenging is that?
That's such a good question because a lot of people feel the fear of that, and we hear
Mm,
so many stories that it's scary to think about it. So, communication is by far your best friend. So if you are ever going to get into development, but really in any kind of business, you want to get really good at communication. And for anybody that knows me, I'm the most transparent individual that you will ever meet. You ask me a question, I will answer it, and I will tell you what's really happening. So I just think communication is key, but what we try to do is do it right from the beginning. We don't wait until, everything is completely done and then tell everybody, oh, by the way, which I have seen people do. And that's what happens when you do that. You do get the entire community and they will be upset. So there's multiple um, points that you want to make. You want to make an introduction right at the beginning to the counselor of that ward right away. If you intend to develop, introduce yourself and let him or her know that you are going to keep in touch and keep them updated. Nobody wants to be surprised at a council meeting. So that is 100%. Maybe you want to meet your NPP. Maybe you want to go and meet the city planner. Those are things that you should be. If you're going to be a developer, you have to become a developer. Those are things that you will have to do very proactively, not reactively, right from the beginning. So when you do all those things, it helps out a lot. Of course, the community has to be involved. We are a little bit lucky, Darren, that in Ontario they have removed appeal processes. Back when I first started, appeal was a huge thing. Now people are not able to appeal. The neighborhood, once you have been approved for your development, uh, the neighborhood or the community association or whoever their dog and grandmother are no longer able to appeal the decision. So that helps us a lot, and I think that just now becoming a really good communicator is key. And not just for you as the developer, but your entire team. Like we have our urban planner, and people get ask me this question all the time. I have an urban planner in Mississauga, but I'm working on a project in Brockville. Can I use the same? I would prefer to utilize a well established, well known urban planner and architect in the same area where my project is, because they're going to help you communicate so much more. I have my urban planner, he goes to golf with, the mayor. And you want this kind of situations. You want the full on, the extra level of communication, if I can call it that, to progress throughout your project. And these are key things. I know it's cliche, maybe, we're going to the golf course, but that's where things happen. And you have to be aware as a developer, you have to work all angles and be transparent, communicate.
yep, I love it. I love the Brockville reference too. Shout out to Brock Vegas. Love the city. Um, Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. So can you share one kind of challenging land development project you had in the Ottawa area, and what you learned from it? I mean, we learn from successes, and we also learn from failures. So, is there had any challenging land developments that you learned something or you overcame, and it ended up being a good result?
Oh my goodness. A million. A million. If I think I told you before the podcast, I didn't have anybody teaching me all this stuff. I kind of had to figure it out. I made a 2 million, 3 million mistakes. It's been crazy. But there's so many challenges. I don't even know where to begin. But I think one of them, I think what people maybe would learn from this in a valuable tidbit here is figuring out the financing structure that you want at the beginning to match where you want to exit. So having a clear path or a clear vision of where do I intend to exit this project, and having the way that you capital stack your project in a manner that will allow you to do that exit properly. So what I mean by that is, sometimes we can get into situations where we're putting together, first mortgage, maybe you've got a second mortgage with registered funds, and maybe you've got some equity partners. But if you have different timelines for all of them, you're putting yourself in a situation where if you're going to exit, 3 years down the road when you get your draft approved, um, and people want to exit at different times, you're setting yourself up for a ton of headaches, right? And I see this a lot. Or if you say we're gonna go the whole way, we're gonna go through construction, that kind of level of finance capital stacking that you want to do from the beginning, it has to match ideally what you're going to do at the exit point, the same as your corporate structure that you're buying the property on, the same way that you want the accountant to set everything up accordingly to where you want to exit to minimize the tax implications to you and to your investors. So, all of that has to do with capital stacking, making sure that everybody, whoever comes into your project, is aligned with where you're going to exit, and there's not going to be any issues with allowing you to exit the way that you want to exit and when you want to exit. It's going to help you a lot. At the beginning, when I first started, Darren, I didn't think that far ahead. I knew where I would exit, but I didn't think, oh, let me just make sure that everybody's in line and everything lines up at the beginning. I didn't do those little things. I only learned that afterwards, after a lot of headaches, trying to figure out, okay, are you staying in longer? Are you not? Are you okay to stay on, or do I have to replace you? All of those kinds of things can really create a lot of problems. And if there is an investor who is a high ownership into your project, that can be completely detrimental to you if that person is not on board to going all the way or wherever it is that you want to exit. They could almost completely kill the entire project. And this happens over and over again to many developers that I've seen in the past, and this is a common mistake. So I would say that that's one of them. I mean, there's like a million of them that we could talk about.
I love that you've had a million mistakes and you admit it like the rest of us, and the whole idea is to learn from it. And I know one of your passions is to help people that want to learn about land development and tell them, this is the way you do it and avoid the mistakes that I made and this is what I learned. So what's the vehicle that you're helping teach new people to learn about land development that want to get involved in that?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I did start coaching back in 2020 when COVID hit and a lot of people reached out. So I have just launched my Land Development Academy. You can feel free to go www.landdevacademy.com. And that's my third version of the program that I launched back in 2020. So it's been a really great journey learning how to teach, putting a program together. This program, the Land Development Academy, that was just launched last week, actually, is a complete full view of everything that I have learned as a coach for the last 3 years, teaching others about land development and understanding how people that are coming into the land development space brand new, the level of detail and the visualization that they need to see in order to grasp the concepts and the fundamentals of it. So that's what I've done in this last program is a complete overhaul of my last two programs, and it's really exciting to basically relaunch a full entire new program, maximizing everything that I've taught in the last 3 years.
Oh, I love it. I love the education focus. Okay, I'm going to ask you one question, but I want to make sure I could talk all day about this stuff. I'm fascinated, Karina. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Your social media handles at I am Karina Guzman and at Creative Dev Ventures. That's for Instagram. Karina Guzman on Facebook and LinkedIn, and Creative Dev Ventures for Facebook and LinkedIn. So if I could ask one question, and this doesn't have to be a piece of land that is for sale or out there,
Mhm.
but if there was one piece of land in Ottawa or the Ottawa area right now that you could develop, even if it's not for sale,
Yeah.
what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I would say for anyone here in Ottawa, the South End is still an untapped, so we're talking about Riverside South, Bowesville. That area is booming for anybody that knows Riverside South. It's booming, but there's a whole piece of it that is untapped, and that's where the brand new station is coming in. I think that is the next master plan community. If I could get my hands on that piece of land, I would be so excited. But it's all that. Like I'm so passionate about building communities and building things that people will really thrive in for generations to come. That is my thing. I'm just so excited about that. So those are the kinds of lands that I love, and it's anywhere where you can get creative, where the city is in full support of development, where the opportunity is there, and the people need it. So it just makes so much sense. That would be my ideal.
I
area.
love it. All right, Karina, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening. Have an amazing day. Thanks for watching this episode of Control and Compound. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you never miss a new episode. And if you're ready to learn more, head to our website, controlandcompound.com. The link's below.